If you ever touched a grave that bore no name, you may have just awakened someone who was never meant to be forgotten. You used to think the one burned at the stake was a heretic. Everyone said so. The records said so. The bells rang when the ashes fell. But have you ever leaned close enough to smell the soot still clinging to Stonehand? Notice that among the dust wasn't Teja's flesh, but a letter that no one dared send, a confession not belonging to the one who died, but to the man who led the sermon that morning and walked away crowned in incense and silence. Perhaps you've knelt beneath that altar before, the one they polish every week, the one said to be blessed with saintly blood. Perhaps you didn't know there is a hollow chamber beneath it, a box no larger than your 2 hands, carved from cedar, sealed with bone, and locked with a silence older than your name. And in that box lies a truth. Someone was killed to protect someone else's sin. And if you listen carefully, in the hour when no prayers are spoken, you might hear breathing, right behind you, like someone trying to speak even without a tongue. The ashes were never cold. You arrive at the chapel with soot still embedded in the grooves of its stones. The fire long extinguished but never forgiven. The villagers call it cursed, the clergy call it closed, but someone left the door unlocked. You're not sure if you're here to clean, to restore, or to confess. You tell yourself it's just a job, catalog the ruins, document the old reliquary, maybe patch a wall or two. But the first thing you notice isn't the ash, it's the silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that presses into your ribs like guilt you don't remember earning. The kind that tastes of old wax and wet parchment. The altar still stands, blackened at the edges, marble bescarred hairline fractures running like veins toward the floor. You touch it, it's warm, that's not right. The sun hasn't touched it in days. There are no torches burning, but it pulses, faintly, like something buried beneath it is still breathing. You step back, you shouldn't have touched it, but you already did. You sleep that night in the old vestry with the broken shutters and the scent of mildew pressed into the wooden beams. You dream of a rope, a crowd, a voice reading a sentence, not yours, but familiar. You wake before dawn with blood at the corner of your mouth and your fingernails filled with earth. You don't remember digging. The next day you find the ledger, tucked behind the altar, where stone meets rotting wood, its leather cover blistered and warped from heat. Inside, the ink has bled, but the entries are still visible. Names, dates, confessions. But on the final page, scrawled in a hand that shakes even on the parchment, "Do not bury me with it. It is not mine." No signatures, just those words, over and over, until the page runs out. You hear a creak behind you. The pew closest to the pulpit has shifted. You didn't move it. You checked for wind, for rats, for something you can name, but nothing makes sense. And the next morning you find your satchel placed neatly at the threshold of the chapel, as if someone tried to send you away gently. You ignore it. You return to the altar. You kneel not out of reverence, but to see the cracks more closely. That's when you see the outline, a seam, a square cut into the floor beneath the altar, now barely visible under layers of soot and stone dust. A hidden compartment. You press your hand against it and feel something give. Not open but shift, as if the chapel is listening, as if it's remembering you too. That night, the dreams return, the same voice, now louder, choking on words swallowed centuries ago. And then just before waking you see it, a face, eyes gouged, mouth sewn shut. But the expression isn't terror, it's betrayal. You rise before sunrise and begin scraping. Fingertips raw, sleeves blackened, dust in your throat. The seam widens, the stone lifts, and there, in the hollow beneath, wrapped in cloth that smells of frankincense and regret, is a box cedar, heavy bound in iron, etched with a name that's been scratched out and rewritten twice. You don't open it, not yet. You place it on the altar and step back, and the floor beneath you shifts again. The chapel breathes. You sit in the back pew, where the light doesn't reach. You open the ledger again. The ink has changed. There's a new line. It reads, "You carried it once before. You will carry it again." You didn't write that, but you know it's true because you remember the smell of burning skin. You remember the sound of bells tolling for the guilty. And you remember standing beside the pyre, holding a book full of sins, but not your own. You thought the box would stay shut, but some things were never meant to be locked, especially not truth. You tell yourself you won't open it. You even say it aloud, as if saying the words makes them binding. But the box sits on the altar like a wound waiting to be lanced, and with each hour that passes it breathes deeper. The chapel grows colder. The dust doesn't settle. The candles, though unlit, seem to weep wax across the floor in thin, trembling lines. You circle the box again and again. The iron bands across it are rusted but intact, each inscribed with the Latin phrase you now understand far too well. Veritas non saputa esse, truth is not buried. But it is. You buried it. Or you watched it be buried and said nothing. You don't remember the details yet. Not clearly. Just flashes, rope robes, a face you loved, a lie you agreed to. You press your fingers to the seal and feel the cold bite of metal. The chapel seems to inhale, and then, with no flourish, no thunder, no permission, the latch clicks open. The box doesn't creak. It exhales. Inside, wrapped in cloth stiffed with age and sorrow, is a letter, and beneath it another, and beneath it another, and beneath that bones, charred, delicate, serrained, not in a heap but in order, like a memory trying to rebuild itself. You reach for the topmost letter. The ink is bled, but the name remains. It's yours. Not your current name, the one before. The name you thought you abandoned with the habit and the vows and the silence. You scan the lines. It is not a letter of guilt. It's a warning. They will bury my voice in your mouth. It reads, and you will carry their lie until your teeth crack from holding it in. Your hands shake. You lift the second letter. This one is unsigned, but the handwriting is the bishop's, the one who ordered the execution, the one who swore under oath that the accused was a danger to the faith, the one whose sins you helped hide. The letter is a confession, a real one, admitting to everything: abuse, bribery, silent sport with flesh and wine. But he never delivered it. He left it here, buried it with the body of the one he named a heretic. And you watched him do it. You held the incense. You've recited the verses. You've locked the door. You look back at the bones. You think you see something move. But no, just your breath, fogging the air. You try to replace the lid, to close it, but the box won't shut. Not anymore. You hear footsteps, not outside, inside, the chapel. You turn, nothing, just the shadows moving like memories across the stone. You close your eyes and listen. A hymn soft, wrong, out of tune, a child's voice, singing something that doesn't belong to the liturgy. You recognize it. It was hers, the one they burned, the one they silenced, the one whose letters now rest on your palms. You whisper the words aloud, and the chapel hums. The altar groans. The wall behind it, a hairline fracture splits the stone from ceiling to floor. The floor beneath your feet trembles. You drop the letters. They scatter like feathers in a place that has never known wind. You fall to your knees, not in prayer, in surrender. You remember it now, all of it. The trial was held in secret. You were there. They handed you the final scroll to sign the declaration of guilt. You hesitated. She'd looked at you, not in anger, in trust. And you signed, because silence was safer than truth, because they told you she was dangerous, because the church must survive, even if the innocent don't. And now the box is open, and the truth is out, and the bones are no longer still. One has rolled to the edge, as if offering itself. You pick it up. It is warm. You placed it in your pocket. You don't know why, only that it feels like a promise. The next morning, you return to the chapel with tools, not to repair, to dig. You pry up the tiles behind the altar, following the crack. There, beneath the floor, you find the original foundation, and beneath that, a second chamber sealed with wax and marked with symbols older than the church itself. You break the seal, and the air that spills out is not stale. It smells of myrrh and fire and unspoken grief. Inside, more boxes, each marked with a name, none of them saints, all of them silenced. And in the center, a single chain of rosary beads, bead made of bone. Yours is the last name missing, but you know it will be added, because you've opened the box, and some truths, once exhumed, cannot be They erased her name from the church's records, but the fire remembered it. And so did you. The ledgers were always locked away, kept in the archive tower where sunlight never touched the ink. You remember this now not as memory, but as muscle. The weight of the keys on your belt, the feel of parchment against your thumb, the sound of the bishop's voice saying redact this one as casually as if erasing a person was no more difficult than blotting out a word. The ledger you now hold in your hands is not one meant to be found. Its binding is scorched, the clasp rusted, yet it survived the fire. Or perhaps the fire spared it. You open it slowly, expecting pages, but it opens to ash. Each sheet burned only in its center, leaving the margins intact, as though someone had tried to kill the names but let their shadows live. You lift it to the light. There are still words visible, ghostly outlines pressed into the paper from a heavy hand Aurelia. But it's still here, faint as breath on glass. You run your fingers over it and your fingertip comes away black and not with soot, but with ink that should have been gone. Ink that bleeds again under your touch. The chapel groans around you. A gust of wind pushes open the main door, though no storm brews outside. You take the book with you to the old confessional, now barely more than a wooden shell with a curtain-like old skin. You sit, open to the next page, another name, and another, none of them recorded in the Book of Saints, but all of them familiar. These were the ones who came to the bishop with stories, stories that endangered powerful men, women who bled without reason, boys who spoke of rooms without windows, servants who heard too much, every one of them gone, or punished, or, worse, sanctified posthumously with someone else's story. You remember the scroll you once wrote, a letter of divine clarity, signed by your hand but spoken by someone else's mouth. It condemned Aurelia. You still remember the wax seal pressed with your ring, though your hand shook. You left the building after the verdict and vomited behind the apse. No one asked why, no one cared. Now each page whispers. The names rise in your ears like a litany rewritten by ghosts. You begin to copy them, not into parchment, but into the floor. You scratch each one into the wooden plank beneath the pews. Your blade dulls, your knees ache. But you keep going, one name per night. A new prayer, a new act of defiance. You reach 28 before the blade snaps. You do not curse. You press your forehead to the floor and hear something shift in the walls. A stone falls. A loose brick behind the choir loft reveals a cavity, another scroll. This one different. Thicker, bound in leather, but never opened. It has no title, no date, but when you unroll it, you find your own handwriting, a full testimony. Every sin you watched, every lie you helped bury, but you never wrote this. Not in this life, not with this hand, but it's yours, your cadence, your shame, your truth. You stare at it and weep not for your guilt, but because you know now, Aurelia didn't curse the church, she saved it. This is what she bit, not vengeance. Evidence her final act wasn't defiance, it was documentation, and they burned her for it. But now you hold it again. You walk to the altar with the scroll in hand. You lay it on the stone. It hums. The walls flicker. You hear a voice, not from outside, not from memory, from within. It says only one thing, read it, so you do. Alone, in the dark, you speak the names one by one, each syllable ringing out like a bell in a chapel that forgot how to mourn. You read until your voice cracks, and even then you keep reading. It was never meant to be read aloud. The parchment itself tells you that. Each line written in ink so faded it shies from the candlelight, like words ashamed of their own weight. No signature, no seal, no formal greeting, just a heading in trembling script. For the day they finally listen, you sit beneath the cracked arch of the pulpit, where no one has stood in decades. The wood groans beneath your weight, as if it remembers sermons spoken too close to sin. You unroll the scroll again. The air thickens. The chapel, though empty, no longer feels alone. It listens, and you begin to read. The sermon does not preach of salvation. It is not written in absolutes or commands. It is not interested in obedience. It begins with a question. How many souls must be burned for one lie to hold its shape? The question rattles through you. It is not addressed to the congregation. It is addressed to you. And to every priest who stood silent, every scribe who altered the words, every gatekeeper who guarded the wrong doors. You read on. The sermon tells the story of a child born under a red moon, marked from birth by a bishop who feared what she might see. A girl who could recite psalms backwards by heart, not as witchcraft, but because no one taught her forward. A girl who wrote letters no one read and still left them folded between pages of holy books, hoping that someday someone would read between the verses. Now that she did not die because she sinned, she died because she documented, and back then you took her notes, you handed them over. You watched as the fire was lit and told yourself you were powerless. The sermon doesn't accuse, it grieves, it mourns the silence, it calls it holy. That is what breaks you, the realization that silence had been sanctified, that obedience had been weaponized, that what you thought was piety was complicity. You pause halfway through the scroll, your throat dry, your hands trembling. The candle beside you gutters violently. A cold wind runs through the nave like a breath exhaled from the stone. You keep reading. They will say, I spoke heresy. The sermon says, but heresy is only the name they give to truth that doesn't kneel. They will say, I tried to undo the faith, but I only tried to remind them that Christ died with open arms, not closed fists. If they fear my words, then they know I spoke their secrets aloud. You finish reading. The final line is not in words. It is an oppressed stain, a fingerprint, burned into the edge of the scroll. You place your thumb against it, it matches. You don't know how, but it does. The chapel breathes again. Somewhere above, the rusted bell rings, once though no rope is pulled. You descend from the pulpit and the floor shifts under your feet. A new fracture splits the tiles, a path, you follow it. It leads you to a door you've never noticed. Behind the old baptismal font, iron-bound locked, but your hand knows the shape of the key before your mind does. You reach into your satchel and draw out the small bone key, the one you found in the box, the one you pocketed without thinking. It slides in perfectly. The door creaks open. Stairs spiral downward into dark. And still, you descend. You do not take the candle. The darkness welcomes you. It smells of earth, salt, and something older than rot. A crypt, perhaps, but not one for saints. You reach the bottom. There is no light, and yet you see a mural covers the far wall. Crude, scraped into plaster. A figure in robes, eyes scratched out, tongue blackened. But the hunts, those remain. One open, one clenched, and between them, a scroll and a torch. The mural bears a name, Aurelia, beneath it, in childlike letters. I spoke, you buried. But the stone cracked. You fall to your knees, not in guilt, not in reverence. In return, you press your hand to the wall. The plaster crumbles beneath your touch, behind it a cavity, and within it, another scroll. This one smaller, folded in silk. You take it. The writing on the outside says, only. If you still remember, read me aloud. You don't open it. Not yet. You climb the stairs. The chapel seems brighter now, not lighter, like something inside it has remembered how to glow. You stand once more behind the pulpit, you hold the scroll, and your voice hoarse but steady says aloud, "This sermon was never spoken." But tonight, someone finally listened. You thought the fire ended with her body. But some flames don't burn, would they burn silence? You dreamed the chapel burned again. But this time, it was not the roof that collapsed. It was the altar that opened. From its heart rose not smoke, but voices, a choir of names long buried, singing not hymns but confessions. You woke with your palms blistered, though no flame touched them. The scroll still rested on the pulpit unopened, the wax seal warm beneath your fingertips. You lit no candles that morning. The sunlight entered the chapel for the first time in days, not as warmth, but as in white, without mercy. You unsealed the scroll, the silk parted like breath, and inside you found not words, but drawings. A child's hand, unsteady, a figure robed in black, a face with no features, and fire every page edged in fire. The last drawing showed the chapel split in two, with a figure walking into the crack. That figure looked like you. You returned to the crypt beneath the font. This time the stairs welcomed your steps, as though they had been waiting. The mural was different now, not altered, revealed. The dust had fallen away. A second figure had emerged beside a head bowed, hand outstretched. You reached toward it. The plaster gave way. Another cavity, another box. This one smaller, bone white inside. A lock of hair, wrapped around a ring, your ring. The one you gave up when you left your vows. You'll remember now. The night you left the cloth, they told you to burn everything you did, except that ring. You had given it away, to her, to Aurelia, as a promise. They'll forget you. You had whispered, "But I won't." But you did. Until now. The scroll from the pulpit now makes sense. The drawings are not warnings. They are memories, yours, hers, intertwined. The fire had been set not to destroy her, but to erase your bond. Because love, real, defiant, unsanctioned love, was more dangerous than any doctrine. They saw what you were to each other. They wrote it down as treason, as impurity, as witchcraft. But it was love, and they burned her for it. You hold the ring now, pressed into your palm until it bites. You walk the chapel perimeter once more. Every stone hums. Every pew creaks under unseen weight. The altar is bleeding wax again, though no candles burn. You kneel. You whisper her name. In remembrance, Aurelia, Aurelia, Aurelia. The cracks deepen. Not in the marble, in you. The parts of yourself sealed by guilt begin to crumble. You see the trial now clearly. You stood beside the bishop. You held the oil. You kept silent as her sentence was read. And worst of all, you nodded. You wake from memory to find the scroll on fire. But it does not burn away. The fire moves along the edges, illuminating the drawings as if lit from within. A single line appears across the parchment in fresh ink. The truth will not wait for your courage. You stand. You walk to the bell tower. The rope is frayed, but whole. You pull it once. The sound echoes not just through the village, but through time. You see windows open. Faces appear. The people still remember, or at least, they remember the fear. You shout from the tower. Not words. Her name. Again and again, Aurelia. The floor below you cracks. The chapel shakes, but you do not stop. You descend, find the ledgers, and toss them into the center aisle. The official records, the false names, the redacted guilt. You set them alight. The fire is not wild. It is precise. It burns only what was written in lies. The murals remain. The bones remain. The ring in your hand grows hot. You press it to your chest. You hear her voice, not in rage, not in sorrow, in peace. You remembered. You collapse in the front pew, weeping not because of the fire, but because the silence is finally broken. She is no longer forgotten. You are no longer nameless. The fire that once killed her has returned not to destroy, but to purify, and you, once a coward, have become its keeper. The fire cleansed the chapel, but the road beyond its doors is still haunted by those who never made it back. The village sends no more offerings. The paths leading to Centaur grow more covered and narrow, as though the land itself is trying to swallow the road whole. You step outside for the first time in days. Smoke no longer curls from the bell tower. The bell rope lies coiled and blackened like a serpent at rest, and yet someone has left a mark, a symbol drawn in chalk on the chapel's wooden door to intersecting circles, one scratched with an X. You recognize it. It was the same mark the condemned used to leave carved into stones as they were led away. Not a plea, not a prayer, a warning: there is no return from here. You wipe it clean, though you feel no hands nearby. The path beyond the chapel dips into the woods where once, long ago, pilgrims would travel by lantern light, those seeking miracles, confessions, forgiveness. You know what happened now. Some never reached the altar. You take the ring still warm in your hand, thread it through a cord around your neck, and begin walking the path backwards toward the old well at the forest edge, the place they used to bless newcomers, or so the stories said. You find the stone still slick with old moss, the rim cracked. Something catches your eye near its base, a line of bones, childlike, arranged in a curve like a crescent moon. You kneel. A scrap of cloth rests beneath them. Written in rust-colored ink are names, 12 of them, none listed in the pilgrimage records. You whisper one aloud. The wind groans through the trees. You whisper another. The rope once tied to the well shaft lifts slightly, as if tugged from below. You shine a lantern down. There is no bottom, only a reflection of yourself, flickering, then gone. You drop a stone. No sound. The forest is watching now. You feel it, not in malice but in mourning. You sit beside the well. You read each name slowly, carefully, with your full voice, with your whole body, and when the last name leaves your lips, the wind shifts. The trees lean inward. A path appears, overgrown, but present. You follow it. Deeper the forest thickens. You find marker stones etched with symbols you once thought pagan, spirals, teeth, eyes, all carved in reverence, not fear. You come to a clearing. The scent is bare, except for a single, sunken circle of scorched earth. A campfire once burned here. You kneel beside it, and you see it. The remains of satchels, pages, rosaries, a child's toy carved from bone. They were stopped here not by man, not by beast, by decree. A decree never written, but spoken by cloaked men who followed them through the trees and whispered absolution through clenched fists. You dig your hands raw. The earth resists, then yields. A box again, this one older, wrapped in oilcloth, sealed with wax shaped like a bishop's ring. You break it. Inside, 12 lockets, each containing a name, a sketch, a note to the pilgrims who've never made it to the chapel. Not heretics, not blasphemers, just inconvenient. Witnesses, maybe carriers of something real. You fall backward. You weep again, but this time, not in guilt. In fury you carry the box back to the chapel under dusk's broken light. You lay it at the altar. The floor hums. The cracked tiles rearrange, and a new line appears on the stone. No pilgrimage ends where it was meant to, but all of them leave footprints. That night, you relight the candles. One for each name, one for each step never taken. The flames dance not with sorrow but with recognition. You sleep in the pew, the ring against your chest, the names echoing in your dreams. This chapel was never for the saved. It was for the forgotten, and tonight, they have been remembered. They burned her in daylight, but the trial was held at night where memory falters and guilt wears holy robes. The bell rings at midnight again. You don't pull the rope, you don't need to. Some guilt tolls itself. You're alone in the chapel now, at least, in the way that most understand solitude. But the walls murmur, the floor remembers, and the font sealed once, more pulses like a heartbeat buried in stone. The box rests beneath your bed, unopened, since the night the redactors came and fled. You're not ready to open it again. But the dreams don't wait for readiness. That night they come differently. Not flames, not whispers. A room, a courtroom not of marble, but of shadow. And you standing at its edge, watching, afraid to enter, afraid to turn away. Aurelia is there, shackled not with chains, but with verses, literal scripture wound around her wrists like binding ropes. Ink bleeding into her skin like curses written in divine calligraphy. The judges do not have faces, only collars, ropes, symbols where eyes should be. One of them reads from a scroll. Not accusations, but expectations. She must confess what we have already recorded, he says, or else the record becomes flawed. You see yourself, sitting near the rear, pen in hand. You are younger, cleaner, the ring still on your finger, but your eyes are hollow, like someone had already borrowed your soul. The trial continues. Witnesses are called. Each one speaks not to what she did, but to how they felt when she entered a room. She made the air feel sharp, one says. She didn't smile during communion, says another. Her silence was not humility, it was defiance. The judges nod. They understand this language. Aurelia never raises her voice, never protests, only watches you, the part, with eyes that do not accuse, but ask, why are you writing this down? You want to scream. You want to step into the memory and drag yourself away from the bench. But you can't. You're rooted there, part ghosts, part regret. Then the sentence is read, to be cleansed by fire, to be removed from the book. You wake before the pyre is lit, but you smell the smoke, on your clothes, in your throat. You stumble to the wash basin and scrub your arms until your skin reddens, but the scent lingers. In the mirror, you see the faint outline of scripture wrapping your wrists. You did not write them, but they remember you. That morning you descend again to the crypt. This time, something waits for you. On the mural wall, a new figure has been drawn. You, not robed, not noble, kneeling, beside Aurelia, and above you both words scrawled in ash. Truth cannot be burned. It only waits. A drawer in the far wall, once sealed, now lies open. Inside, parchment, fresh, unaged, as if written last night. You unroll it, a transcript of the trial, but this time, her voice is included, each line marked with her answers, each page showing the cracks in their logic, the holes in their charges. She did not deny the truth. She revealed theirs. You take the scroll upstairs, you place it on the altar, and for the first time in years, you ring the bell during daylight. The villagers come, hesitant, but strong. You do not preach. You do not command, you simply read. Her words, the ones never allowed in the official record. Her voice, trembling but defiant. Her questions, sharp as knives wrapped in lace. The people listen. Some weep, one walks out. But most stay when you finish. The chapel is quiet. Not empty full, not with bodies, with breath, with names, with memory. You step down from the altar and kneel before the font. You press your hand to the stone. You whisper, we remember. And somewhere, far beneath the floorboards, you feel warmth rise, not heat, not fire, just warmth, as if something lost had finally come home. They silenced her voice, but the bell remembered. And when it rang on its own, no one could claim it was just the wind. It rang at the hour of no prayer, when the sky was neither night nor dawn, when even shadows seemed unsure where to rest. One told, then another, then two. You counted each one from your cot in the vestry, heart pounding not with fear, but with recognition. No one else had touched the rope, it hadn't been repaired. The frayed ends still curled beside the altar, untouched since the day the redactors fled. But the bell moved. You saw it the next morning swaying slightly in the tower's ribs, like something had brushed against it from the inside. You climbed, hand over hand up the narrow stair, each step creaking like bone beneath candlelight. You hadn't stood in the bell tower since you were a boy. Before the trial, before her, before silence became your only liturgy. The ropes were blackened, the wooden beam cracked, but the bell itself gleamed faintly, as if recently polished, at its base carved anew into the wood her name, not etched by tool, but burned. You touch the letters, still warm Aurelia, you say it aloud. The bell answers one long groan, not a ring, a sigh. Beneath the tower, the village stirs. You see windows opening, torches lit, but no one comes near. They remember the last fire. They fear the next one. You descend slowly, hands blackened with soot not your own. And when you return to the chapel floor, you find a visitor, a girl barefoot, wrapped in cloths too thin for mourning, her eyes wide, not with wonder, but recognition. She doesn't speak at first, only walks the perimeter of the chapel, hand grazing the walls. When she reaches the altar, she stops. She used to sing here. The girl whispers. I can still hear it. You ask her name. She says it doesn't matter. Only a real. You ask how she knows that name. She points to her wrist. Faint marks. Inked verses, faded but familiar. They tried to write over me too, she says. But the skin remembers. She produces a folded scrap of paper. You unfold it to him, not from the canon, not from any book, but, the melody. You heard Aurelia hum it the night before her trial. Hands trembling, lips barely moving. You asked her what it meant. She said, it's what they won't let me say aloud. You teach the girl the tune again. Together, you hum it under the empty arch. The bell above rings once more. Not loudly, not in warning, in recognition. The girl leaves without giving her name, but she leaves behind something else, a candle unlit, carved with her initials. You place it beside the font. That night, you dream of the bell tower again. This time, you see who rang it. A boy, not one you recognize, but wearing your robes, your ring. He pulls the rope, but it does not move. The bell tolls anyway, and in the space between sounds you hear her voice. Clear, steady, you're not alone. You wake with tears crusted at your jaw. You light the candle the girl left. The wax runs clear. No smoke. You place it on the altar and whisper she is remembered. The next morning the font opens. On its own. The box inside sits unchanged, but beside it now lies a second box, smaller, wrapped in silk. You lift it. Inside bone, not hers, yours, or the version of you that stood silent all those years ago. The part of you that nodded when she begged you with her eyes. The part that wrote without questioning. The part that let her burn. You take the bones outside. You dig no grave. You place them at the chapel threshold, where shadow meets sun. You do not bury them. You let them bleach. Let them stay. As reminder, as relic, the bell rings once more, and the wind carries your name upward, not in shame, but as confession. Dust is what they left behind. But when you listened closely, it wasn't dust that moved, it was her voice, finally unburied. You begin to notice the dust doesn't settle like it used to. It moves strangely now, gathering in the corners of words you speak aloud, circling the base of the font, clinging to the pages of the forbidden scroll like ash, remembering its source. You sweep it daily, and yet it returns forming patterns. You tell yourself it's nothing, just old stone breathing. But then, one morning, you find letters traced in it, faint but deliberate. A word, listen, not shaped by shoes, just drawn into the dust on the altar step, as if someone leaned close from beneath and finally spoke through the floor. You kneel, brushing away the rest of the grime. More words appear, faded fragments of something once forgotten. They erased me from the records, but the walls remember. So do you. You rise and return to the hidden chamber beneath the font. expecting silence. But when your hand brushes the lid of the box, the air grows dense, warm, and then words spoken from nowhere, or rather, from everywhere. Her voice, not imagined, not dreamed, clear, dry like old parchment, but steady. Do not rewrite me again. It stops you cold, not out of fear, but guilt. She knows what you did, and she forgives you, but she will not let it happen again. You find yourself weeping not from shame, but from it, that after all they did to her, she still speaks, that the girl you once let burn is now teaching you how to stand. You place your hands flat on the floor. I'm listening, you whisper. The dust stirs again, this time not in words, in direction, a trail forming toward the sacristy, the small side room where robes were kept, where chalices were cleaned, where secrets were whispered. You follow it. The door groans open. Inside, nothing but cobwebs, mold, and a crumbling wall. But as you step in, the dust curls toward a crack in the masonry. You press your fingers there. The wall gives. Behind it, a cavity. Inside, a scroll, unsealed, unburned, intact. You pull it free, heart pounding. It bears no name, but you know whose it is. You've seen her handwriting in the margin of hymn. You've watched her fingers tremble as she scribbled verses they refused to hear. You unroll it. It is not a sermon. It is not a testimony. It is a letter. To you I do not blame you. But if I must die, let it not be for nothing. Take what they gave me, pain, silence, firand. Turn it into something that cannot be rewritten. Turn it into witness. You fold the scroll with trembling hands. You walk back into the chapel, into the morning light. You place the scroll on the altar, not hidden, not buried, displayed. And beside it, you lay the names you scratched into the pew, the bones you unearthed, the hymn she once hummed. One by one, the relics assemble not as proof, but as memory, a reliquary not of miracles, but of truth. The dust does not rise today. It settles, like a breath finally exhaled. That night, you sleep in peace. For the first time, but the dream returns. This time she stands at the center of the chapel, whole cloaked in ashen light. She doesn't speak. She sings, and every grain of dust becomes a note. When you wake, the floor beneath your bed is warm. The cracks in the marble are sealed, and the bell silent but not empty, just resting, waiting for the next name to remember. Some books carry stories, others carry scars, and when you opened this one, it bled because truth always does. You found it behind the statue of the silent saint, the one no one prays to anymore, tucked beneath the marble hem of his robes, as though hidden in fear or placed with reverence. A book, old, bound in black leather, its clasp broken, its spine cracked like dry lips forced shut too long. You lifted it slowly. It was heavier than it should have been, heavier than any book made only of parchment and ink. When your fingers brushed its cover, a chill raced through you, not from cold, but recognition, the kind of recognition that lives in the blood, not the mind. You carried it to the altar. The chapel watched, as it always did. The font stayed silent, the bell still, but the air grew denser, like the seconds before thunder. You placed the book down. You hesitated. You had opened many books in your time, but never one that felt like it might open you back. You unclasped the cover. A gust of air exhaled from its spine. And then blood. Not yours, not fresh, but blood still. A thin, dark smear ran from the center seam across the open pages like a wound remembering its source. You stepped back, breath held, and watched as words rose through the stain. Not carved, surfaced, as if bled into view. Aurelia, the unwritten saint. That was the first line. Below it, testimonies, her real ones, unredacted. Phrases you remember watching her speak but never saw written down. Now, they wrote themselves, page by page. A living manuscript, a reckoning. Each word written not in Latin, but in the common tongue, the one they forbade her to use before the court. The language of the people, the language meant to be heard, not hidden. The book continued to bleed, not profusely, each line edged in red like a sacred margin. You did not stop it. You turned page after page, and with each, more voices joined hers, names you had scratched into pews, stories once whispered behind veils, testimonies burned, now returning in ashen bone. One name struck you hardest, yours, on a page near the middle. The script shifted. Now it spoke not of her, but of you. He knew. He watched. He buried her truth beneath his silence. But he also returned to memory. Once restored, can be forgiven. You wept then, not for what you did, but for the chance to make it known, to let it live. You turned the page again, blank except for one symbol, the seal of the church, cracked, redrawn in dripping ink. Below it, one line: truth that bleeds cannot be canonized, but it cannot be denied. You closed the book. Its warmth pulsed beneath your hands. It was alive now, or perhaps it always had been. You left it on the altar, no glass, no chains, no prayers, just truth as it was, as it hurt, and as it healed. That night, the bell rang again. Once and somewhere in the village, a child awoke crying, not from fear, but from memory. And a voice, soft and unseen, whispered in the dark. I remember her too. The church gave them no graves, only silence. But when the procession began unseen and unnamed, the earth remembered who they were. It began with footprints. Not yours, not anyone's you could name, but they appeared all the same, leading from the edge of the forest to the chapel steps, bare small, pressed deep into wet soil, as though whoever made them carried the weight of memory alone. You followed them at dawn, half believing they'd vanish under sunlight, but they remained. 12 pairs, no more, no less. They circled the chapel once, then disappeared into the north field, the one the old priest used to call the Quiet Acre. No headstones, no markers, just grass that never grew straight. You'd asked once why nothing was buried there. He only muttered, because everything was. And now, the ground trembles beneath your feet like it knows it's been found. You kneel, press your palm to the soil. It breathes, or perhaps it sighs. You dig, not with tools, with your hands. The earth gives easily, as though it's waited too long to hold secrets. 6 inches down, your fingers scrape wood, then cloth, then nothing, an empty box, not decayed, preserved. On its lid, carved by nail or bone. She spoke for me. You do not scream, you simply keep digging. Another box, and another, some with carvings, some with only silence. One filled with ashes, one with petals, one with nothing but a rosary twisted so tightly it snapped. 12 boxes, 12 lives, not saints, not criminals, just forgotten. You carry them, one by one, into the chapel. You line them beneath the mural. You light a candle for each. No names, no rites, just presence. And then, as the last flame catches, the bell tolls again. 12 times. The doors open. The wind shifts. The village gathers. They say nothing. They just come, old women with hands like folded letters, men with eyes that remember too much, children who should not yet understand but somehow do. They step into the chapel and see the boxes, and they do not flinch. They kneel one by one, as if they knew this day would come. One girl, no older than 10, touches the box with a rosary. She whispers, "My grandmother told me a woman used to come here to cry for someone she lost." Another man steps forward, points to the empty box. "There was a boy, he vanished after the trial. They said he ran, but I think he was taken." Each box becomes a story, not full, but enough. A murmur spreads through the room, not even grief, just remembering. And then you speak. You do not preach, you do not confess, you just say the names. The ones from the ledger, the ones from her letters, the ones carved into wood, now echoing into air. The candles flicker, the boxes hum, and above you, the mural shifts. New faces appear, drawn in soot, some weeping or watching. They understand. This chapel is no longer for the living alone. It is now a reliquary of the a sanctuary for what history tried to erase. You ask if they want to stay. Many nod. One woman says, "We were never told where to grieve." And now, they have somewhere. That night, you cannot sleep. Not from unrest, from awe. You sit by the altar. The book is open. The pages have changed. New entries, new voices, all signed with a single word beneath them. Witness. The procession continues. In dreams, in footsteps, in candlelight. They come not seeking vengeance, only to be named. And you who once watched them burn now carry their memory like a torch. One you will never let go out. You entered the confessional to speak, but it was the silence that answered, echoing, not your sins, but hers. It stood where it always had, tucked into the far corner like something too ashamed to meet the altar's gaze. You hadn't entered it since the day you heard her final confession. Not that they ever recorded it. They said she refused, said she spat at the priest and cursed the faith. But you were there. You remember, she didn't curse, she didn't scream, she just whispered one sentence. "I forgive those who choose silence, but not those who turn it into scripture." And then they sealed the record with an empty page, called her unrepentant, called her lost. You press your palm to the curtain. The fabric is rough, unchanged. Your fingers hesitate, then pull inside. The wood groans under your weight. The air is stale, thick with breath that never left. You sit across the partition. The other booth waits. Empty. You say nothing at first. Just sit, breathe, listen. And then, as if pulled by gravity older than guilt, your voice breaks. "I was there." The words hang, dry, cold. But the moment they're spoken, something shifts. Not outside, inside the box. The wood creaks, not from weight but from response. You swallow hard. "I let them speak for you. I burned the scrolls after thinking that would be enough. It wasn't." The box breathes. You hear it. Not a wind, not an echo, a breath. Across the partition, something moves. You lean forward, a whisper, so soft it might have been your heartbeat. "Then speak for me now." Your throat tightens. "I'm afraid so was I." You close your eyes. "What if I say the wrong thing?" "Then say it twice." but say it, you grip the edge of the seat. I'm sorry. Then remember, the whisper fades, but not the weight. You stay, minutes, hours, you're not sure. Time folds differently inside what that has held too many secrets. When you finally emerge, the sun has set. The chapel is dim, but something glows faintly from the other side of the booth. You step around, find the opposite seat marked with symbols scratched into the wood. Not Latin, not known, but ancient. Above them, a name, below it, another yours. You trace the markings. A click, the panel beneath the seat lifts. A hidden compartment. Inside, a vial, sealed, red, not wine, not oil, blood. The seal bears the insignia of the tribunal, the same one that condemned her. But on the underside, scratched deep, do not anoint. Witness. You take it to the altar, place it beside the book. The pages flutter. The wind stirs. The bell rings. Once, and the font opens again. Inside, her box remains, untouched, unburned, waiting. You lift it with both hands, set it atop the altar. You whisper, she forgave me. And from the shadows of the confessional, a voice replies, then forgive yourself. Some forgiveness arrives too late to be received. But even then, it waits hovering, like incense over names unspoken. You thought forgiveness would feel like light, like the breaking of a storm. But it came quietly heavy, gray, the kind of weather that makes even candles hesitate to burn. You sit before the altar again. The vial of blood remains where you left it, sealed and silent. The box is open, now not broken, not forced. Opened by what? You don't know. Or maybe you do. The ring she once wore lies inside, polished though no hand touched it. Her scroll rests beside it, unread since the day she was taken. You consider unrolling it again, but something stops you. Not fear, not reverence, guilt, not for what you did, for what you never said. Her forgiveness lingers in the chapel like old smoke, but you never ask for it. Not with your mouth, only with your silence. And silence is not a language the dead should have to decipher. You light 12 candles, one for each box, one for each name the church never dared to engrave. You write her name on parchment again, Aurelia, and place it at the base of the font. It burns without smoke. You whisper the words you should have said that night, the night before the trial, the night you stood behind the tribunal-less curtain with your hands clasped and your spine stiff and your voice missing. I believed you. I didn't defend you. I loved you. I let them kill you. The words fall like ash, and something in the chapel shifts. Not in rage, in grace. A window opens on its own. The wind rushes in, not cold, but firm. A page from the ledger flips open. You step forward. It lands on a name, yours. Beside it, written in unfamiliar hand, silenced. You reach for your pen. Cross out the word. Write instead. Witness. The ink dries instantly. You turn. In the far end of the nave, you see her. Not a ghost, not a dream. A shape made of candlelight and breath. No face, no voice, but the air around her hums with warmth. You do not speak. You bow, and she nods. One motion. Enough. Forgiveness, it seems, does not need to be heard, only felt. She steps backward, vanishing between the shadows of pews. You walk the chapel alone, touch each relic, speak each name, and when you reach hers, you do not weep. You whisper. You live in the memory I now carry. And the bell rings, one slow, steady, as if it too has They've burned her to erase the path. But truth has a way of walking in circles until one day, the fire returns not to destroy, but to show the way home. The night after you wrote her name into the Book of Saints, the fire came back. But this time, it didn't start with smoke or scent. It began with warmth, a pulse beneath your feet, a breath rising from the font. The air glowed not orange, not red, but a soft gold like parchment left in sun too long. You stepped into the chapel just before midnight. The candles lit themselves. Each one flared quietly, as if responding to a signal deeper than flame. The box, the one that had held her ring, her bones, her name sat atop the altar, unopened, but no longer sealed. Around it, the ashes of the old tribunal records had arranged themselves in a circle, 12 names, all crossed out. Except hers, the air did not crackle, it shimmered. And then you saw it on the far side of the chapel wall. The mural changed again. A new figure had appeared. You're not as you are now, not cloaked in guilt or dust or memory, but younger, standing beside her, no longer separate, no longer silent. And between you, a torch, shirt lit. You stepped closer, and the mural brightened. The flame seemed to leap off the stone. You reached out. The heat was real, but it did not burn. A hidden seam in the wall slid back with the grown of stone, remembering how to breathe. Behind it, a staircase, narrow and winding, spiraling downward into what once was a crypt. Or maybe a sanctum. You took the torch and descended. The air below was heavy, but not suffocating. It smelled of candle wax, ink, and something older, pages, perhaps, or promises. The stairs ended in a chamber unlike anything above. Vaulted ceilings carved with names, not in Latin, not in canon, just names. Hundreds of them, carved by hand, some crude, some elegant, and at the center an altar of stone. Upon it, a second book, closed, untouched by fire or time. The cover bore no words, just a sigil, a feather crossed with a flame. You approached slowly, your torch flickered. The moment your hand brushed the book's cover, it opened. On its own, the pages turned, one after another, until they stopped on a blank sheet. And then your name wrote itself. Beneath it, he remembered, so we returned. Behind you, footsteps. You turned, but no one stood there. Only the sound of breathing, not yours. Familiar rhythmic, you turned back to the book. A new line appeared. Will you carry it now? You did not speak. You only nodded. The torch brightened. The walls shimmered, and each name on the ceiling glowed faintly like stars long thought dead, now blinking awake. You carried the book up the stairs, one step at a time. The air grew lighter but not thinner. The weight you bore was not burden, it was witness. When you emerged, the villagers stood in a wide circle. They said nothing, only parted. You walked to the altar, placed the second book beside the first, and the fire that had once destroyed now licked the air like a guardian dog.com/present. Watching, you turned to the crowd, spoke only one sentence. Her truth lit the path. This time, we do not walk past it. One by one the villagers stepped forward. Each laid something on the altar, a locket, a name once whispered but never said aloud. And the fire did not consume them. It wrapped around them, warming, guarding, accepting. You left the chapel doors open that night. The wind sang hymns no one had written. And far above, in the bell tower, the bell rang once, not for warning, for welcome. They tried to silence her with fire, but memory speaks through ashes. And now, her voice is louder than their scripture ever was. The morning after the procession, the chapel is no longer quiet, not in the way it once was. The old silence, sharp, heavy, full of things not said, has been replaced by breath, by footsteps, by voices reciting names that had no place in holy books until now. You stand before the altar flanked by two books, one bound by fire and truth, the other opened by memory and forgiveness. Aurelia's name glows faintly in both, written once in trembling defiance, once in bloodless clarity. Her story has been spoken, and yet she is not done. You know this, because you hear her still, not in dreams, not in whispers, in the wind moving through the arches, in the way candles bend toward the pages when her name is said aloud. You kneel before the font. Its lid remains open. The box is gone, not stolen, not misplaced, gone as if it had finished its work. You look inside and find only one thing, a scrap of her original letter, the one they said never existed. On it, one line remains. When truth walks without a name, it will borrow the voice of the forgotten. You fold it gently, place it between the pages of the living book, and then something unexpected. A figure at the door, dressed in black, head bowed. You do not recognize him, but he kneels, silently, and sets a satchel at your feet. Then he stands, says nothing, leaves you open the bag. Inside ledgers, old ones, from other churches, other tribunals, places where names were removed, truths sealed. You begin to read. Each name is a mirror, each silence a bell unstruck. You realize she was not the only one. She was just the one who burned where everyone could see. The rest disappeared without flame. You gather the scrolls, one by one. You carry them into the chapel's center. You do not burn them. You read them aloud, name by name. The villagers return. They help. Some bring new names, stories, songs half remembered, lullabies once banned. Each one finds its way into the air. The mural on the wall expands. Aurelia now stands at the center, but she is no longer alone. She is surrounded by those who were once forgotten. Some hold torches, others carry books. One child barefoot extends a hand to her. The bell rings again. No one pulls the rope. It tolls for each name spoken. And for the first time in memory, it rings not in mourning, but in witness. The church that once erased now remembers. The chapel becomes a sanctuary of names, of memory, of fire that warms, not burns. And you who once kept silent are now its keeper, its scribe, its voice. But you are not the only one. Others arrive from nearby villages, from distant roads. They come not seeking miracles, but memory, and they find her in every crack of the floor, in every line of the living book, in every name spoken without fear. Aurelia, once condemned, now canonized not by decree, but by those who dared remember. You stand beneath the bell tower one final time. Look up. It no longer feels heavy. You smile, you whisper, she was never silent. We just weren't listening. And this time, you ring the bell yourself. Some souls don't need sainthood because truth, spoken and remembered, is miracle enough. You've just walked through a story without halos, without holy vengeance, without clear villains. Only a girl burned for writing what she believed, and someone who once stayed silent, choosing, finally, to speak. If this story touched you even as a breath, a name you couldn't quite place, or a shiver down your spine when the church bell rang, a comment, even a small one, where you are and which name stayed with you. Because sometimes not being forgotten begins with a stranger who still remembers your name.